The breath in the dark. Cold. It was the kind of cold that did not simply touch the skin, it seeped into bone, into marrow, into the quiet spaces between breaths. It was ancient, patient cold, the kind that had waited long before he fell and would remain long after he was gone. It held him, pressed him, claimed him. Kale drifted in it, weightless and heavy all at once. His thoughts were slow, tangled, half-formed things slipping through numb fingers. Somewhere far away, he knew he had been falling. There had been a storm. Rain slicing through the air like knives, thunder cracking the sky apart, the ground slick beneath his boots, treacherous and unyielding. He remembered the edge. The moment his foot had slipped. The way the world had tilted, not violently, not suddenly, but with a terrible, quiet certainty. And then, nothing, no impact, no pains, just this, cold. It wrapped around him like a grave. He did not know how long he had been there. Time did not move in that place. There was no sun to rise or fall, no rhythm to measure existence. Only the slow, suffocating drift toward stillness. Toward silence. Toward the end. He should have been afraid. But even fear had frozen. Until, warmth, it came softly at first. So faint it could have been imagined. A whisper against his cheek. A breath. Kale's mind stirred. Just barely. The warmth came again, this time clearer. Damp, steady, alive, it brushed across his face, breaking through the cold like a fragile flame in endless night. His brow twitched. Something wasn't right. Cold did not breathe. The thought was slow, clumsy, struggling to form, but it was enough. His body reacted before his mind could follow. A shallow inhale. Air filled his lungs, sharp, burning, real. And with it came pains. Not the distant, dull ache of fatting awareness, but something immediate. Bright, crushing. It flared through his ribs, his side, his limbs, reminding him all at once that he was still very much alive. Kale gasped. The sound tore from his throat, ragged and weak, but it was a sound, a declaration. Alive. The warmth returned. Closer. His eyelids fluttered. Heavy. So heavy. Each attempt to open them felt like lifting stone, like dragging himself upward from deep, black water. His body resisted, clinging to that cold, empty drift. But the warmth persisted. Steady. Insistent. Real. Kale forced his eyes open. Darkness greeted him. Not the empty darkness of nothingness, but something deeper, something alive. It pressed close on all sides, thick and heavy. He could feel it even without seeing, like a presence that watched without eyes. For a long moment he could not move. Could not think. His breath came shallow, uneven. Then, a flicker. Two small points of light appeared in the darkness. Gold. Soft. Unblinking. Kale froze. They hovered just above him, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from whatever they belonged to. Eyes. The realization struck him slowly, but when it did, it hit with sudden, sharp clarity. Those were eyes. Watching him. His heart lurched. His body tried to move, to recoil, to do something, but pain held him down. His muscles barely responded, weak and uncooperative. The eyes tilted. Curious. Studying. Then, another pair appeared. Slightly to the side. Also gold. Also watching. Kale's breath caught in his throat. Two? There were two of them. The darkness shifted. Not much, just enough that the air seemed to move, to ripple. The warmth against his face intensified, and he realized what he had mistaken for a breeze was not the wind at all. It was breath. Something was breathing on him. Something close. Something very, very real. I'm dreaming, Kale whispered. His voice was barely sound, just a broken breath shaped into words. The eyes blinked. Both sets. Then a sound came. Low, soft. A rumble that vibrated through the ground beneath him and echoed, faintly off unseen stone. It was not a growl. Not quite. There was no threat in it. Only curiosity. Something in Kale's chest tightened. Dreams did not feel like this. Dreams did not breathe. The darkness shifted again. And this time it moved enough to reveal shape. A faint glow emerged from somewhere deeper within the cavern, a dim, crystalline light that clung to the edges of stone and reflected weakly across the space. It was enough. Enough to see. Enough to understand. Kale's vision sharpened slowly, the world coming into focus piece by piece. Stone walls rose around him, jagged, uneven, glistening faintly with veins of crystal that pulsed with soft, natural light. The ceiling stretched high above, disappearing into shadow. He was in a cavern. Deep, hidden, warm. The warmth pressed against his sides now, no longer a distant sensation but a clear, undeniable presence. Kale's gaze dropped, and he saw them. They were close, closer than he had realized. Two shapes crouched beside him, their bodies coiled protectively around his prone form. Scaled, winged, alive. His breath stopped. Dragons. The word formed in his mind with quiet, terrifying certainty. Not stories, not myths, not distant legends whispered by firelight. Real. The one on his left was a deep, burning crimson. Its scales shimmered like embers beneath ash, each one catching the faint light and holding it, glowing faintly as if lit from within. Its eyes, those golden eyes, were fixed on him, unblinking intense. The one on his right was entirely different. Pale, silver. Its scales reflected the light softly, like moonlight on still water. Where the red one seemed to burn, this one seemed to glow, quiet, calm, watchful. Two opposites, yet unmistakably the same. Brothers. Kale did not know how he knew. But he did. They moved together, breath together. Even their stillness felt shared, like two halves of something whole. The red one leaned closer. Kale's body reacted instinctively, a jolt of fear cutting through the haze of pain and exhaustion. He tried to push himself away. His arm trembled, barely lifted, and then pain surged through his side, sharp and unforgiving. The sound escaped him before he could stop it. His strength gave out. He fell back against the stone, breath shuddering. The red dragon stilled. The silver one shifted. Both of them watched him now, not with hunger, not with aggression, but with something else. Something softer. The red one lowered its head slowly, carefully, until its snout hovered just inches from his shoulder. Kale held his breath. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to fight, to do anything but lie there helpless beneath the gaze of a predator. But he couldn't move, couldn't even raise a hand. All he could do was wait. The dragon inhaled, a slow, steady breath. Then, it nudged him. Gently. Kale blinked. The touch was light, careful, as if testing him, as if checking. "You're not," he whispered, voice shaking. The red dragon huffed softly. Warm air washed over him again. The silver one leaned closer, its head tilting. And then, it made a sound. A soft, high chirp. Kale stared at them. Confusion slowly overtook fear. "You're not trying to kill me," he said, more to himself than them. The idea felt absurd. Impossible. Dragons did not nudge. They did not chirp. They did not sit quietly beside injured humans and keep them warm. Because that was what they were doing. Kale could feel it now. The heat surrounding him wasn't coming from the cavern alone. It was them. Their bodies pressed close to his sides, radiating warmth that seeped into his frozen limbs, chasing away the cold that had nearly claimed him. He hadn't survived the fall. Not on his own. They had found him, stayed with him, kept him alive. "Why?" he whispered. The question slipped out before he could stop it. Neither dragon answered. Of course they didn't. They were dragons. And yet, the silver one shifted closer. Closer still, until its scaled body pressed fully against his side, curling protectively around him. The heat intensified. Soothing, steady, safe. The red one followed, settling against his other side. Together they enclosed him. Not trapping, not restraining, protecting. Kale's breath hitched. "I don't understand," he said. But his voice lacked the fear it once held. Because something else had taken its place. Something fragile. Something dangerous. Trust. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the warmth sink deeper into his bones. His body relaxed despite himself. The pain dulled. The cold receded. And for the first time since the fall, he felt safe. The realization was as terrifying as it was comforting. Because it made no sense. Because it shouldn't be possible. Because nothing about this should be real. And yet, it was. Kale opened his eyes again. The dragons were still there. Watching. Waiting. Not leaving. You stayed, he murmured. The words felt heavy. Important. The red dragon flicked its tail slightly, a small, almost dismissive movement. The silver one blinked slowly. As if the answer was obvious. Of course they had stayed. Kale swallowed. His throat was dry. His body still weak. But his mind was clearer now. Clear enough to understand one thing. He was not alone. Not anymore. And somehow, that mattered more than anything else. Hours passed. Or maybe it was days. Kale could not tell. Time had no meaning in the caverns. There was only the steady rhythm of breath. His, theirs, the slow rise and fall of warmth surrounding him. He drifted in and out of sleep, never fully aware, never fully gone. Each time he woke, they were there, unmoving, watching, guarding. Once he tried to shift, to sit up. His muscles trembled, protesting the effort. Before he could fall, the red dragon pressed closer, steadying him. The silver one adjusted its position, supporting his side. Kale froze. You're helping me, he said. The red one huffed. The silver one chirped softly. Kale let out a weak, breathless laugh. That's insane, he muttered. But he didn't pull away. He couldn't. Not just because he lacked the strength, but because he didn't want to. The warmth, the presence, the quiet, constant reassurance that he was not alone in the dark. It anchored him, kept him here, kept him alive. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him again. His eyes closed. His breathing slowed. And as sleep took him, he felt it, a light pressure against his chest. He opened his eyes just enough to see. The silver dragon had lowered its head, resting it gently against him. Its eyes half closed. Calm, trusting, the red one remained alert, watching the caverns, guarding them both. Kale's vision blurred. Not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from something else. Something unfamiliar. Thank you, he whispered. The words were soft, barely there, but they were real. And for the first time in longer than he could remember. He meant them. He slept. And this time, the darkness did not feel cold. The bond that should not be. Warmth had become his world. It surrounded Kale in every moment, wrapped around him like a living shield, steady and unwavering. It was not the distant, impersonal warmth of sunlight or fire. It was closer than that. Alive, breathing, guarding. When Kale woke, it was always there. The slow rise and fall of scaled bodies pressed against his sides. The quiet rumble deep within their chests, a sound that was neither voice nor growl but something in between, something that seemed to exist just for him. The first few times he woke, he expected them to be gone. Expected the cavern to return to cold, empty silence. Expected the warmth to fade like a dream. But it never did. Every time his eyes opened, they were still there. Watching, waiting, as if they had nowhere else to be. As if he was exactly where they had always intended him to be. Kale lay still for a long moment, staring up at the faintly glowing ceiling of the cavern. The crystals embedded in the stone pulsed with soft light, like distant stars caught beneath the earth. He had begun to recognize their patterns. The brighter ones dimmed slowly, then brightened again, almost like breathing. Even the cavern felt alive. Or perhaps it was only alive because of them. He shifted slightly. Pain flared through his ribs, sharp and immediate, but it was no longer overwhelming. It no longer threatened to drag him back into that cold, endless dark. It hurt, but it was survivable. Healing. That alone felt like a miracle. You didn't let me die, he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. The red dragon stirred immediately. Its head lifted, eyes snapping open with alert intensity. The silver one followed a heartbeat later, slower but no less aware. They both looked at him. And Kale felt it again, that strange, impossible sensation. That they were not merely seeing him. They were listening. I should be dead, he went on quietly, staring at the cavern's ceiling. After that fall, no one walks away from that. He let out a slow breath. No one's. The red dragon huffed softly, shifting closer until its side pressed more firmly against him. The silver one nudged his arm gently. Not reassurance. Not exactly. But something close. Kale turned his head, looking at them properly. Really looking. They were still small. That realization struck him more clearly now than it had before. When he had first seen them, fear had painted them as larger, more dangerous than they truly were. But now he could see the details. The red dragon's scales, while vibrant, lacked the deep, hardened sheen of full maturity. Some were still softer at the edges, not yet fully set. The silver one's wings were strong but not fully extended. When it stretched them, there was a slight imbalance, as if it was still growing into its own form. Hatchlings, or close to it. Too young to be alone. Too young to be doing this. Where are your parents? Kale asked softly. The words hung in the warm air. Neither dragon moved. But something shifted. It was subtle. A stillness that hadn't been there before. The red one's tail stilled. The silver one's head lowered just slightly. And suddenly, the cavern felt quieter. He didn't need an answer. He understood. Yeah, Kale whispered, his gaze softening. The same. The word slipped out before he could stop it. Same. Loss. Absence. The kind of emptiness that lingered long after everything else was gone. Kale closed his eyes briefly. Memories stirred, ones he rarely allowed himself to touch. A home that no longer stood. Voices that no longer called his name. A life that had ended long before he ever stepped near that cliff. He exhaled slowly. When he opened his eyes again, the dragons were still watching him. Closer now. The silver one shifted, pressing its forehead lightly against his shoulder. The red one remained alert, but it leaned in just enough that its presence was undeniable. Not distant. Not separate. With him. Kale swallowed. Guess that makes three of us, he said quietly. Alone. Together. The thought was strange. But not unpleasant. Time passed. Measured not in hours but in moments. Moments of waking. Moments of resting. Moments of quiet understanding that grew between them without words. Kale learned their movements. The way the red one always reacted first, quick, curious, unafraid. The way the silver one observed before acting, watchful, thoughtful, calm. The way they moved together, always aware of each other's position, as if connected by something deeper than instinct. Brothers. The word felt right. It fit them. And slowly, without meaning to, Kale began to give them names. He didn't say them out loud at first. It felt too human. Too fragile. But the thoughts came anyway. Fire. For the red ones. Not just for the color, but for the way it moved. The way it filled space with its presence, bright and bold and impossible to ignore. And moons. For the silver one. Quiet. Steady. Always there even when not immediately seen. Fire and moons. Kale exhaled slowly. You're going to hate me for that, he murmured under his breath. The red dragon tilted its head. The silver one blinked. Kale let out a soft laugh. Yeah, he said, probably. But he didn't change them. He couldn't, because somehow, they felt right. The first time they brought him food, Kale thought he was still dreaming. He woke slowly, his body heavy but stronger than before. The warmth was still there. The dragons were still there. But something was different. There was a smell. Rich, savory, real. Kale blinked, turning his head. And froze. There, just within reach, were strips of meat. Fresh, still warm. He stared at it. Then at them. You, he began, his voice catching slightly. You did this. The red dragon puffed slightly, its chest lifting. Pride. It was unmistakable. The silver one nudged the meat closer to him. The message wasn't spoken, but it was clear. Kale hesitated. Not because he didn't trust them, but because this was impossible. Dragons didn't hunt for humans. They didn't care. They didn't. You're fating me, he said slowly. The words felt surreal. The red dragon huffed. The silver one nudged the food again. Kale let out a weak breath of laughter. Right, he said. Right, of course you are. Because why wouldn't they? Because everything else about this was already impossible. He reached out slowly. His hand trembled, but it moved. It worked. That alone was enough to make his chest tighten. He picked up a piece of meat. Still warm. Still fresh. He hesitated for only a second. Then took a bite. The taste hit him immediately. Rich. Strong. Real. Not imagined. Not a dream. He was eating. Because they had fed him. Kale closed his eyes briefly. Thank you, he said quietly. When he opened them again, both dragons were watching him. Closely, as if his reaction mattered. As if his survival mattered. Something shifted inside him. Something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Not just relief. Not just gratitude. But something deeper. Something warmer. Belongings. Days passed. Or what felt like days. Kale grew stronger. Slowly. Painfully. But undeniably. He could sit up now without collapsing. Could move his arms without trembling uncontrollably. Could breathe without feeling like his ribs would shatter with every inhale. And through it all, they never left. Not once. If one moved, the other stayed. If both left, it was only for a short time. And they always came back. Always. One time, Kale woke to find the space beside him empty. The warmth gone. The silence pressing in. For a moment, panic surged. Sharp, unexpected. He pushed himself up too quickly, pain flaring through his side. Fire, he called, his voice rough. A moon. No answer. The cavern felt larger without them. Colder. Lonelier. Kale swallowed, forcing himself to breathe. They'll come back, he muttered. They have to. They had stayed this long. They wouldn't. A sound. Soft. Familiar. Kale turned. And there they were. Emerging from the shadows of the cavern's far side. The red one first. The silver one just behind. Relief hit him so suddenly it left him breathless. You're back, he said. The words came out softer than he intended. The red dragon trotted forward, nudging him as if nothing had happened. The silver one followed, settling beside him. Warmth returned. Steady. Unbroken. Kale let out a long breath. Don't do that, he murmured. I thought. He stopped. Didn't finish the sentence. But he didn't need to. Because the silver dragon shifted. Closer. Pressing gently against him. And the red one remained near, its presence strong and certain. We're here. The message wasn't spoken. But Kale felt it. Clear as anything. He closed his eyes briefly. Yeah, he whispered. I know. The moment everything changed came quietly. So quietly that Kale almost missed it. He was sitting upright, leaning against the cavern wall. The dragons rested nearby, fire alert, watching the entrance. Moon curled closer, calm but aware. Kale's gaze drifted. His mind wandered. And then, a thought formed. Strange, unfamiliar, not entirely his own. You came. Kale froze. His breath caught. What? The word slipped out before he could stop it. The cavern remained silent. The dragons did not move. But the feeling, it lingered. Soft, certain. You came. Kale's heart began to pound. Did you? He looked at them. Really looked. The silver dragon lifted its head. Their eyes met. And in that moment, the feeling returned. Stronger, clearer. You came. Kale's chest tightened. I did, he whispered. His voice shook. Not from fear, but from something else. Something overwhelming. Something impossible. He wasn't hearing words. Not exactly. But he understood. And more than that, he felt understood. The red dragon shifted, pressing closer. You stayed. The feeling echoed. Kale closed his eyes. Emotion surged, sudden and powerful. Oh yeah, he said. I stayed. Silence followed. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Full of something unspoken. Something that didn't need words. Because somehow, somewhere between warmth and silence and survival, a bond had formed. One that should not exist. One that defied everything the world believed about dragons and humans. And yet, it was real. Kale opened his eyes. Looked at them. His dragons. His brothers. I'm not leaving you, he said quietly. The words settled into the cavern. Firm. Unyielding. A promise. And for the first time, he knew he wasn't alone anymore. And neither were they. The brothers who chose him. The first sign was not sound. It was absence. Kale woke to silence. Not the quiet, living stillness of the cavern, the gentle hum of crystal light, the slow rhythm of breathing scales, the subtle shifting of wings. No, this was different. Empty. Sharp. Wrong. His eyes snapped open. The warmth was gone. Both sides of him were cold. Kale's breath hitched. Fire. His voice cracked, raw from sleep. No answer. A moon. Nothing. The cavern stretched around him, dim and still. The glowing veins in the stone pulsed softly, indifferent to the sudden hollowness pressing against his chest. For a moment panic surged, fast and suffocating. They were gone. The thought came hard and immediate. Left. Taken. Lost. Kale pushed himself upright too quickly. Pain flared through his ribs, sharp enough to steal his breath, but he barely felt it. His gaze scanned the cavern, searching every shadow, every flicker of light. Fire, he called again, louder now. A moon. The names echoed against stone. Returned to him empty. His chest tightened. No, no, they wouldn't. A sound. Soft. Distant. But real. Kale turned sharply toward the cavern's entrance. Footsteps. Many. Heavy. Deliberate. Humans. His blood ran cold. No, he whispered. The word barely formed before instinct took over. Hunters. They had found the caves. Of course they had. Dragons did not remain hidden forever, not from those who knew how to look. Kale forced himself to stand. His legs trembled. His side screamed. But he stood. Because he had to. Because they were out there. Because if the hunters found them. No, he said again, more firmly this time. They won't. He staggered forward, each step a battle against pain and weakness. The cavern suddenly felt enormous, every shadow a threat, every echo a warning. The footsteps grew louder. Closer. Voices followed. Low. Controlled. Dangerous. Tracks laid in here. Fresh. Stay alert if there are hatchlings. Kale's jaw tightened. Hatchlings. They knew. Of course they knew. Dragons that young, unprotected, were worth fortunes. For scales, for blood, for whatever twisted purposes men like that found justification for. Kale's hands clenched into fists. Not them. Not fire. Not moons. He wouldn't let it happen. He reached the edge of the cavern where the light from outside barely touched the stone. The air shifted here, cooler, carrying the scent of rain and earth. And something else. Smoke. Irons. Men. Kale pressed himself against the wall, peering carefully toward the entrance. He saw them. 4 figures. Armored. Armed. Moving with the confidence of those who believed themselves hunters, not prey. One stepped forward, crouching near the ground. Dragons, he confirmed quietly. Another chuckled. Small ones, he said, easy work. Kale's vision darkened at the edges. Easy. The word echoed. Something cold and sharp settled in his chest. Not fear. Not anymore. Anger. Slow. Controlled. Dangerous. He stepped forward. Deliberate. Unsteady but certain. A loose stone shifted under his foot. The sound was small. Barely anything. But in the silence of the cavern, it was enough. The nearest hunter's head snapped up. There. Their eyes locked onto him. Kale stepped fully into view. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on him. Surprise flickered. Then understanding. A survivor, one of them said. Another smirked. Unlucky place to wake up, he added. Kale said nothing. He stood there, breathing steadily, ignoring the pain that threatened to pull him back down. You see them? One of the hunters asked. Kale met his gaze. No, he said. The lie came easily. The hunter studied him. Long, carefully. Then he smiled. Slow, predatory. You're lying. Kale didn't respond. Didn't move. The tension in the air thickened. Heavy. Fragile. Kill him, one of the others said. We don't need witnesses. The words were casual. Meaningless. As if they were deciding what to eat. Kale felt something inside him go still. Completely. If this was where it ended, then so be it. But not before. A sound cut through the cavern. Sharp. Familiar. A roar. It echoed against the stone, powerful despite its size. Alive. Fire. Kale's heart leapt. The hunters spun toward the sound. Too late. A flash of crimson burst from the shadows above. Vast. Fierce. Unstoppable. The red dragon crashed into the nearest hunter, knocking him off his feet with a force that belied its size. Claws scraped against armor, sparks flying as metal met scale. Dragon, someone shouted. Chaos erupted. Steel flashed. Men moved. But they were too slow. Another shape followed. Silver. Silent. Precise. Moon struck from the side, wings snapping open as it slashed across a hunter's arm. The man cried out, staggering back. They moved together. Perfect. Instinctive. Brothers. Kale staggered forward. No, he shouted, get back. But they didn't. They wouldn't. Because they weren't fighting for themselves. They were fighting for him. The realization hit Kale like a blow. They had come back. They had heard. And they had chosen to fight. For him, something inside him broke. And reformed. Stronger. Colder. Clearer. Kale grabbed a fallen weapon, a short blade dropped by one of the hunters. It felt heavy in his hand. Unfamiliar. But he held it anyway. Hey, he shouted, drawing attention. The nearest hunter turned. Kale moved. Pain screamed through his body, but he pushed through it. Because it didn't matter. Because this wasn't about him anymore. The hunter swung. Kale ducked barely and drove the blade forward. It struck. Not deep. Not clean. But enough. The man staggered back, shocked. Kale didn't stop. He couldn't. He wouldn't. The cavern filled with movement, with sound, with the clash of steel and the roar of dragons. Fire moved like flame, wild, relentless, impossible to contain. Moon moved like shadow, precise, controlled, striking where it mattered most. Together, they were something more. Not hatchlings, not prey, not victims. They were dragons. And Kale stood with them. Humans, against humans. Because these were his brothers. And he would not lose them. Not again. Not ever. The fight ended quickly. Not because it was easy, but because it was decisive. The hunters had come expecting helpless creatures. They had found something else. When the last of them fell, silence returned. Broken, uneven, heavy with breath and aftermath. Kale stood in the center of it. Chest heaving, hands shaking. The blade slipped from his grip, clattering against stone. For a moment, he simply stood there. Then, a nudge, gentle, familiar. Kale looked down. Fire stood beside him, golden eyes bright, body tense but unharmed. Moon approached more slowly, its movements careful, watchful. Checking. Kale swallowed. I'm okay, he said. The words felt strange. Because he was. Not entirely. But he was alive. And so were they. That was enough. Fire huffed softly, pressing against his side. Moon lowered its head, resting it briefly against his shoulder. Warmth returned. Stronger than before. Not just protection. Not just instinct. Something deeper. Something chosen. Kale exhaled slowly. They're going to send more, he said. The truth settled heavily in the air. This place isn't safe anymore. Fire shifted. Restless. Moon stilled. Listening. Kale looked toward the cavern entrance. Beyond it, the world waited. Dangerous. Unforgiving. But open. Free. He turned back to them. To the ones who had saved him. Who had stayed. Who had fought for him. We have to leave, he said. The words felt final. A turning point. Fire tilted its head. Moon watched him steadily. Kale stepped forward. Toward the light. Toward the unknowns. Then paused. Looked back. I'm not leaving you, he said. The promise was quiet. But absolute. You stayed for me. He met their eyes. So I stay for you. For a moment. Nothing moved. Then fire stepped forward. And lowered itself. Kale blinked. What? The dragon huffed, nudging him. Impatient. Insistent. Understanding came slowly. You want me to? He hesitated. They were strong. But still young. This was a risk. But so was everything else. Kale let out a slow breath. All right, he said. Carefully, he climbed onto Fire's back. The dragon shifted slightly under his weight, but held. Steady. Certain. Moon moved beside them, wings unfolding with quiet grace. Kale tightened his grip. This is a terrible idea, he muttered. Fire rumbled. Amused. Then, they ran. Vast. Through the cavern. Toward the light. The world opened around them in a rush of wind and sky. Blinding. Endless. Alive. Fire leapt. Wings snapping open. Air caught beneath them. And suddenly, they were flying. Kale's breath left him in a sharp gasp. The ground fell away. The cavern vanished behind them. Mountains stretched out below, vast and untamed. Clouds drifted like oceans above and beneath. And beside him, Moon soared. Effortless. Free. Kale laughed. A wild, disbelieving sound torn from somewhere deep inside him. I'm flying, he said. The words felt unreal. Impossible. And yet, here he was. Above the world. With dragons. With his brothers, fire roared, a sound of triumph, of life. Moon answered, clear, strong, together. Kale looked between them, his heart full. We made it, he whispered. Not just from the cave, not just from the hunters, but from something deeper. Loneliness, loss, the quiet, endless cold that had once defined his world. He wasn't alone anymore. None of them were. And whatever came next, they would face it together. 3 against the world. Humans, dragon, brothers, and for the first time, that was enough.